Dinesh will discuss the experiences and learnings Smarten has had deploying over 100 locations over the past 3 months in 40 cities around the world. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our next guest speaker, Dinesh Malkani. Thank you, Dinesh.
Hey, thanks, Simon, and thank you, everybody, for listening in. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a presentation with you. So I'm just going to bring up my slides. Just give me 1 second right here. And off you go. Simon, I will let me know that people are able to see my slides.
Yep, we can see your slides, Dinesh.
Okay, perfect. So, basically, I'm actually going to talk about the whole back to work story, but I'm also going to talk a little bit about what we think is going to happen in the future. And to be perfectly honest with you, right, my presentation is basically a lot about learnings that we've had. So as Simon mentioned, I think over the last 3 months, we've been extremely busy trying to get a lot of deployments done around the world. We're in 43 cities as of this morning. And we've been working with some of the leading companies around the world. And we've had a lot to learn. We've had a lot to pivot, as you can imagine. Trying to get a company to run in the middle of all of this was not easy. But it's been pretty exciting. So I'm going to try and share that with you. So let me keep moving here, right? I think the first thing is that all of you have a lot to deal with. All of us have a lot to deal with. And I think businesses in general, right? If I look at it from the employee standpoint today, their concerns are really around workplace culture. They were used to a particular culture. They were used to getting out of the home. They were used to getting to work and things like that. And that's all changed. And it's going to continue to evolve, right? So that's one of the things that's kind of on their mind. They're thinking about employee experience because now they have all these different tools that they need to work with. They've got tools at home that have been given to them. And then when they get back to work, there's going to be a process of re-entry. There's going to be a different way in which they will have to adapt and work to the new normal. So they're thinking about their own experience, right? They're thinking about the flexibility of working and what does that really mean to them? When do they go? How often? Who are they going to work with, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, top of mind is safety. In many countries, things are pretty stable. In some, they open, they close. And I know, basically in the US, a lot of states have the same, situation. So that's really on the employee side, the things that are going on in their head, right? Now, from an organization point of view, it's pretty chaotic because you've got to think about safety and compliance. There are government compliance rules. There are company compliance rules. And safety is very, very critical, right? In the pandemic, I think what's important is, and even in the new normal is, how do we maintain productivity, right? Because the whole intent is to increase productivity, not go the other way. Flexibility is great, but will that impact productivity? And the jury is out there, right? Operational efficiency, because obviously a lot has changed and there needs to be, automation in place, because from what used to be a fixed world, if you're moving into a completely different dynamic, then you need to think about how efficient you want to be as a company, right? If you're thinking about employee engagement, I mean, we deal with it and, we don't have the amount of people that you all have, but really in terms of how does every employee feel? Are they really engaged? Do they understand what the company is up to? Et cetera, right? And then cost optimization. In my discussion with most of my customers, I think the CRE heads and the CIOs and the head of HR have all been given money to go through this, but they've also been told that in the next 12 months, you need to figure ways out how to reduce cost. Obviously, businesses have taken a little bit of a hit, right? And last but not the least is workforce rostering. And this is very interesting. Actually, on the last session, I heard Matthias talk about the workforce planning and workforce and the workplace planning actually both coming together. I actually believe in that. I think it's going to become an absolute reality. And so people are thinking about how the rostering will actually take place. But this is what we believe on both sides, all of you and the employees are actually thinking about, right? And of course, it's the dealing of fixed to flexible. I think in the old world, it was, prearranged plans, fixed working hours. You had only 1 or 2 categories of employees, and you had a very collaborative culture. And then in flexible, it's remote working, it's flexible working hours, your seating is not predefined. There are 4 categories of employees that we're hearing that are going to come out, right? And this will be by department. So just appreciate the complexity of that. There'll be permanent, work from home, there'll be hybrid, and there'll be floaters, right, who can decide what they actually want to do. And of course, there is, to be perfectly honest with you, in the old world, even though it was fixed, the utilization was not that great. Because if you really think about it, there was always capacity available in the organization. Because of the 100 that were expected to come in a day, people will be on leave and some will be traveling, but they still had fixed spaces. That was not the best way to utilize those spaces. In the new world of flexible, I think it creates a new opportunity. But this shift is what's reality, and we've got to be able to think about it very differently. So what were the learnings we had? This has now been almost 4 months since the deployments really began, right? And I'm going to run through with you these learnings one by one. Learning number 1 is about work rostering, because if you really think about it, right, in many countries and many companies, they've defined that a certain set of people will go in. The first question that comes up is, what is that percentage of workforce that's going to work remotely and what's going to work in the office? That's done at a fairly high level, right? And then you go down to the next level and you talk about the employee work location and what are the categories of employees. Are they permanently from home? Are they permanently in office, or are they flexible? Even still, there are a lot of employee categories that are being classified as permanently work in the office, and many of them in the admin functions, right? And then comes the challenge of, okay, now we've defined the percentages. By the way, percentages will change. The government will come up with regulations, the states will come up with regulations, companies will come up with regulations. So the percentages will change, and they'll change by department, right? So it's going to be fairly fluid, I think for the next 12 to 18 months, right? And so how do you make decisions on which employee goes, which teams go? Do we have a concept of team A and team B, and just from a business continuity process? And when does team A go and when does team B go? It's not easy. It's a fairly complex problem. And every one of our clients during our deployments, when we were talking about the workplace, they said, what about the workforce? Because both have to be tied together. And I think another learning we had was that where there's complexity, obviously AI becomes pretty crucial, right? Can the system make recommendations on, how the team should be split up, who should be going at what particular point in time? And can all of that be tied, by the way, to the space that's available? Because in the past, when you thought of rostering, space was not a constraint, right? But right now we all know, because of social distancing, anyway, that's been halved in many cases, right? So work rostering suddenly became one of the biggest topics of conversation, basically, that was going on. It was not in isolation of the workplace. The second key learning that we had was that whatever you try and do manually, if there's a way to automate it, it just gives you better results, right? And it can be pretty painful. So we've had clients that have had hundreds of locations, hundreds of floors, and are trying to figure out, well, if I have a floor, what of the floor plan can and cannot be used? And many cases, well, there were people running around taking tapes and measuring the distance from one seat to the radius and figuring out which seats are available and which are not available. Well, to be perfectly honest with you, right, that could change because the distances could change. And one learning we had was that one seat actually, usually is in the radius of about 8 seats. So there was a need to, again, think about how do we automate this process? Wouldn't it be great if we just got a floor plan, threw into an AI engine, and it told you exactly which seats are available and which ones are not, right? But this is a problem that a lot of companies are facing. And then after that, obviously, when your seats are gone, how do you do the allocation, right? Which is what I talked about in the previous slide. And will the employees have choices? Will they have an app versus can they do it on the desktop? Basically, are conversations that our customers have been having. Now, there are solutions for pretty much everything, right? The third was that cost is important. And so while all these things need to be deployed, they are expensive and they take a little bit of time. But the net result is, how do we do this in a manner that, it's not just about us putting it in, but it's really about us preparing the organization in a way that the new setup will actually help save cost. Because really today, when you think about it, right, there are 100 employees, and there are only 50 seats left because of social distancing. But in the future, but again, of the 100, only maybe 20 or 30 will go. So it's okay. But as you start to plan your organization, you know that eventually you're going to have 100, but only 70 employees, because 30 of them will work from home and you'll be rostering them. So is there an opportunity in the future to actually reduce the space down to, let's say, 50, with 30 work from home? Of the 70, you know that all 70 are not going to go to work. I think this is a real conversation to be had. And there's a real opportunity that companies have to be able to rethink about space cost, because that one desk in some countries is maybe $25,000 to $30,000 per basically year, right? And that could be a lot of saving, right? The other key learning that we had was that no stones unturned. This is top of mind for employees. I didn't want to go into a lot of statistics and data, because I'm sure in all the other sessions it would have been covered. But generally, every one of our companies told us that our employees are very skeptical about coming back to work. So they're thinking that, look, we've got to make sure as an organization, no stones unturned. We think of every possible thing to be able to make our workplace safe. And it begins with screening, all kinds of contactless processes, and putting in contact tracing. And contact tracing in a way that, okay, if I'm in a meeting room, you just know who were all the people that had attended the meeting. To be honest with you, there's a lot of acceptability about these conversations today, particularly with the employees, right? Because everybody wants to be safe. They've also seen that many countries around the world have put in tech and have actually seen better results, right? So there are learnings over here, but across the board, in pretty much all the states that we made deployments, we found that this was absolutely top of mind, but it all had to be done in a very seamless manner. Those little things that companies started putting in the beginning, I think started to create more confusion, because the other learning was around the employee experience. It was like a complete manual, right, that the employee had to go through, and the employee had to remember of all the 10 things they had to do. One of the key learning was, how does all of this come together? And I still bet on the mobile phone, because at the end of the day, that's the one personal device that they have. And if there's a way to give them all of these different things, from pre-screening to how visitors are managed, to how seating is done, or how they raise requests or meeting rooms, I think all of that coming together becomes hugely critical. I think also another element on the employee experience part is culture, right? Because as they go back, they want to be able to sit with people that they're familiar with. At home, they're alone, they're isolated. So when they go back for a purpose. They want to collaborate with their teammates, right? And so obviously that's another consideration that has to come into play, but a huge learning for us that should not be taken basically for granted. But these were the 4 or 5 things that we learned out of the deployments that we had. Our net conclusion, by the way, and I'm a huge believer of this, right, is that there's always been that trigger point to say, when do we shift to a future workplace, right? When do we really leverage on technology to be able to do that, right? And what will be the tenets of what the future workplace will look like? I think the moment is now, because whatever you do today, whatever investments you make today, you have to think about the future. And to me, it's 5 really steps, right? Actually, these are time driven, right? It's like a journey that most companies around the world are basically taking. First was remote working. So everybody ran back. I think it was one of the most successful experiments. A lot of credit to all of you and to all the tech people around the world who could really get, everything ready from an infrastructure point of view. But as they get back to work, how ready is your workplace? Have you got all of the different 10 things in place so that people, as they come back, feel pretty comfortable, right? Where it's going to shift to is the whole flexibility model, right? and basically from the fixed to flexible seating, but that becomes a huge part of the future workplace. And then the next journey, which is going to come up after that, is going to be, okay, now we put in flex desking, but what do we do about rostering? Who goes next? How do we maintain the collaborative nature of the organization? How do we make our employees feel, yep, I'm going to work, but I'm going to be working with the teammates that I know. And so the future workplace, as we think about it, is a place where productivity actually goes up, not down. So you have to think about seamless. You've got to think about things to do where, you know, teams are distributed in a particular manner where they are more productive, not the other way around. The second is the employee experience has to be impeccable. They've been used to working at home. How do you make it really good for them to come back? But at the same time, it's got to be, it's got to be seamless, right? Our belief is the future workplace will be 30% less in terms of cost as you have been used to paying today, just because in terms of space saving and of course everything else that comes with it, right? And then it's going to be flexibility, safe, and compliant. And really, the key to the whole thing is how do you get the right person at the right place, at the right time, at the right cost? Because if you can solve this, really what you're doing is, when you're saying the right person, which means that you're thinking about the company, productivity, you're thinking about the employee. Right place means you're still leveraging on, the different spaces that you have, but at the same time, you've put all the right compliances in place so that, especially after social distancing and basically things like that. And the right time. When do I go? It has to be the right time and at the right cost. It's got to be most cost optimal. But these are really I think that's the key that we need to answer, right? What it'll do is it'll create the engaged and flexible workforce. The employee experience will be really good. Costs will go down. Obviously, your safety equation will go up. And of course, this does mean that you need to start thinking about what's the kind of technology that you will be deploying within your workplace to help you along the journey. To me, at the end of the day, technology is not the only answer. Even though, I'm a techie and at heart, and I've built a tech company around the world, I still think there's a lot of work to be done on the culture side, as well as the whole workforce piece coming together with the workplace. And so, we clearly believe there is a need to reimagine and think about technology and what you're deploying, right? And to me, at the end of the day, it's an end-to-end stack. You can't think of it in pieces, because if you do that, what's going to happen is you're going to land up spending a lot of money. The dots are not going to be connected. The data won't be collected the way you want to do it. And just integrating things becomes a pretty big nightmare, right? So this is just a map of where I believe your technology focus should be at, right? It begins with the digital workplace. Great opportunity for you to think about getting one single mobile app, everything on it, from your re-entry processes, your visitors coming in, your desk management, your employee engagement, all of that coming together and digitizing it. And at the same time, well, today, a lot of people are having conversations about, do I put in sensors? Is the QR code enough? Do I have check-in, check-out and things like that? I think you should experiment, because the entire sensor world is changing much faster than you can actually imagine. If you go and lock yourself down with one particular type of sensor, I think that's going to be a little bit of a problem, right? So think of the digital workplace. The second is definitely desk management. Most definitely, you need to be able to offer that on the web. You need to be able to offer that on the phone. But what is important is, if desk management can work in a highly automated manner, I make a decision on all the people that are going back to work. That's where you partner with the HR teams. And in the back end, if you have a proper desk management system, it'll automatically allocate, using all kind of algorithms, the best people with the best seats and maintaining, that organizational collaborative culture. That's what you need to think of when you think of desk management. Because just giving people an app and just say, okay, you can go here and there, that's cute. But at the end of the day, you've got to think beyond that, right? Because honestly, with all the learnings we had, that was great, but limited, right? So we have to kind of really stretch and think beyond that. And then tied back to desk management is the whole workforce rostering, right? The ability to create teams. Every manager should be able to assign, okay, I've got these 50 people. Who are the ones that go back? I know what limits have been set, but the automation of that and moving that away from spreadsheets, automating it is going to be huge. Last but not the least, the whole demand supply equation is going to change, because you were used to 500 people. Oh, I got 500 people new coming in and I have 500 seats. Well, that's changing, because today, if you got 500 new people coming in, there are many things you can do to distribute those 500 people in a very creative manner, because work from home definitely is one of the options that is available. And you know that your workforce is working in a very dynamic manner. So the old theory of demand and supply, I think, is also going to change. That's where, again, technology and a lot of AI really helps. Expense and chargeback, we're working with two kinds of companies. One is saying it doesn't matter, it's all one cost center. The others are saying, no, we want to be able to now start charging back basis of the actual utilization of the seats. So I want to know what is the utilization, because they're trying to discourage wastage in their space. And that's where the new expense and chargeback systems kick in, because they will tie back to your desk management, they'll tie back to your rostering, they'll tie back to your demand and supply. And that's when your expense and chargeback equation will be fairly accurate, and you'll be able to meet that goal of, well, I need to save 30%, so let me make sure that, you know, my chargebacks are happening in the right manner. And last but not the least, if you save space, if you reduce desk, what happens to assets? And do I need certain different types of assets with every desk, because every desk is going to be flex? And do I need to have lockers? And well, if I have lockers, then can a person book a locker? And what happens to that asset? And so our printer is going to be shared, but that dynamic gets changed as well. So you need to rethink and relook at the asset management, but again, tied back to everything else. The good thing is that if you reimagine your technology stack like this, instead of putting in bits and pieces, our belief is it's much easier to deploy. It takes much less time. It's much more cost effective. And honestly, one of the reasons why we got to, like, literally sitting right here, 43 cities out in 3 months, was because we learned one simple rule: keep it simple. It should be easy. And the day you can do that, really meet the demands of what your teams are actually looking for, and obviously the business basically as well. This is just a picture we conceptualize of the complete digital workplace, but it's a journey. The time to take the journey is now. And, you know, I actually think it's a bold, but there's never been a better time for all of us as an industry to think about what the new workplace is going to be and actually take steps in the right direction, right? That's really the learnings we've had, the kind of work we've done. I must admit that first 3 or 4 months into COVID were pretty challenging, as we were really thinking of what's going to happen. But clearly, this is a very interesting problem to solve. And now with all the deployments done and all these learnings in, I think it's really sharpened us up to make sure that, you know, we put effort in the right areas. But that's really what my session was. I'm going to stop sharing and see if there are any questions. I know we've got like a couple of minutes left, but if there are any questions that may be there. So actually what I'm seeing here is right people, right place, right time might be productive, but is there scope for ad hoc, random, coincidental? So absolutely. See, at the end of the day, the tools are going to try and help you solve a particular problem. And the problem is to be able to do that, but at the same time, you know, be able to maintain that creativity, right? That's why I think the right people equation comes in. You know, to be honest with you, I've been going every alternate day to work because that's what's allowed. But I still love to go back, and I still love to go on the whiteboard, and I like to go and scribble in. But it's with people that I'm used to working with. So how do we get that balance and equation right is going to be super critical, right? Another question is, do you believe we should be planning on social distancing for the foreseeable future? Look, that's why I say use technology. I mean, at the end of the day, you don't want to be rearranging all your seats and desks to meet the social distancing norms. Technology can help you. You give your floor plan in about a couple of minutes. The software will tell you exactly the seats that can and cannot be used. everybody that comes in gets assigned seats that can be used. The other ones are not going to get utilized. And obviously from a cleaning point of view, then it makes it much, much better as well, right? Because you know what got used, helps you from a contact tracing point of view, et cetera, et cetera. I think that whole dynamic gets kind of done, right? And look, if the social distancing norms change, you again use tech to readjust that, as opposed to again taking the tape, running around. And I've seen people do that. That's why I kind of feel that, there's a different way to be able to do it. There was a question around hybrid and floaters, right? So absolutely. See, at the end of the day, when you're a hybrid worker, you get told when you can do and when you can go and when you can't go. That's typically how it would work, because now you have flexibility. The floaters are the ones that, they could be permanently at work or they could be permanently at home. That really depends on the function. They're strategic roles that are there in the company, which you cannot bucket into one role or the other. That's what we really call it. How do you address assigned seating where people do not want to use other people's desks? I think that's great, right? The way the algorithms work is they still try to make sure that they try to fit in the best. They try to give you back your old seat, right? They try to put you in close contact with your colleagues. But if the system can't do it, the tool will let you do that. The tool, and there will be employees who will be uncomfortable with it. So the tool lets you do that, and you go deselect it and reselect it and assign it back, right? That's what it really does. But you have to have the right tools to be able to do that, because your question is absolutely right. It's definitely going to be, basically a challenge. I think there's another question on, what about more hidden cost and impacts, such as commute and impact on environment? Is there a bigger picture here? Look, Flex will cut that out anyway, right? Because you probably have 30% of the people, at least most talk to have said 30% of people, we want them to work from home, and we want to bring them back when we need to, and we need to have a rostering system to be able to automatically assign that. Well, that's what is important, because when you're doing 30%, I think the big picture is then less people commute, and obviously much better for your environment, right? Okay, which tool software do you recommend? I think it's you got to think about the stack, but the whole digital work. So to me, I actually don't think of these things in bits and pieces. I look at this as one end-to-end technology stack. So if you've got to think of the digital workplace, desk management, and your workforce rostering all coming together on one single platform, right? That's what you need, because your life is going to become much easier. The life of your employees are going to become much easier. And obviously, we've spent a lot of time, we actually engineering capacity during COVID, because we saw this coming, and we spent a lot of time to be able to actually do that. And sort of, I think that's where we've kind of reached, right? If there are any more questions, I know I've got 1 minute left, but what I'll leave you with is, I know it sounds a little complex, but honestly, it's not that. I feel that there is an easier way to do this. You need a partner. You need to think of it from a technology point of view. You need to engage with the HR. You need to engage with finance, and be able to kind of make sure that you bring these elements together. Every one of the projects where we got in, where we were working with siloed teams, started to become a little bit of a challenge. Where we found a cross-functional team coming together, it was fantastic, because everybody kind of debated it, but they agreed with it. They fully went behind it. And that's where the projects were more successful. Employees were happier, and they were kind of getting, the ROI that they actually wanted out of it, right? So Mandy's got a question, right? Thanks, Dinesh. Appreciate the holistic view and specifics on how to tackle this flexible model. Look, flex is reality. The more quicker you embrace it, the more quicker you start looking at doing pilots. By the way, do not. And I'll tell you this, even though I would love to come and tell you, you should do this in your whole company. Pick a site, do a POC, pick 4 floors, and make sure you get it right. I think that is important. If you go hammer and tongs and say, you know what, I'm going to do this for 50 locations or 100 locations, I think it's going to be a bit of a challenge. So our recommendation would be pick a few, get them right. Your IT teams are going to want to do security checks. There's employee data involved here. See what works, crawl, run, walk, and then you run. And of course, there are enough good success stories out there. So talk to those people as well. And if you want to have conversations with a lot of companies in the US, just do let us know. We'd be very happy to connect you with them, because they started the journey a long time ago. And for those of you that may be looking at it now, great opportunity, right, for you to actually have essentially speak with them. So I know I'm on my time. Simon, thank you very much. Thank you to all of you. I sincerely appreciate the time, and please do reach out to at Smarten Spaces. We're obviously in the Expo booth as well, but we're a very disruptive company, so I'm looking forward to working with you all. Thank you very much.